First, we can pull the agenda back up. I believe the first is to do roll call. Indicating that all subcommittee members of the school board are here. My watch just went off that it's time. And the next is to move into a motion from someone on the team to approve our agenda.
Motion to approve agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And then we move on to public comments.
The public comments, Dina.
Okay.
All right.
All right, so I'm going to turn it over to Randy to introduce the district planning efforts to DEI and
Yeah,
he's
We have
taking over
a few
this
different
thing.
things that we wanted to bring back here tonight for our last meeting. We're going to talk a little bit about the engagement meetings with students that we're going to be doing. The board is going to hold after the holidays. We're thinking right now, probably in that early February timeframe. And wanting to look at a protocol, and then we'll also look at some things with regards that Tiffany has been working on with her DEI advisory committee. And then also Tiffany's kind of led most of these initiatives with regards to community focus groups to give you a little bit of an update on what's going on in that space. But Tim's put some work to the protocol, which I believe is attached. So Kelsey, if you could just bring that up, that would be awesome. And then I'll let Tim talk about it. Tim, Tiffany and I had a conversation, but we wanted to bring it here for your review and any feedback.
Yeah, thank you, Randy. This is something we had talked about bringing in today at our previous meeting. And as part of the talk, invited some feedback from the high school admin team, invited some feedback from some of our group advisors, not provided feedback, but I got some. And I used that to kind of pull this together, and it's, you probably had a chance to review it. So what we're trying to do here is lay out a bit of a process. What should happen before a meeting, during a meeting, after the meeting, to make sure that the students have the center of conversation, and also to make sure you as board members and your colleagues are well positioned coming in. So if you've got questions, get those to the kids in advance. If the students have questions, we'd encourage groups to get those to you in advance and kind of understand what the format is and have a designated recorder, and then kind of close that communication loop at the end. So notes from the meeting obviously would come to all of the board at some point. Student group gets notes back, and we're all developing in our voice, and give students an opportunity to maybe on further reflection after the meeting, kind of, add on additional comments. So that was kind of the spirit this came into. Then what I just passed out now, there's a reference to a pre-planning form in here. This is obviously not formatted, but these would be the fields we'd anticipate in the form, and it really would just be a way to document a lot of the before the meeting activities. And I guess, with that, I'll open it up to questions, and very interested in feedback.
Oh, go ahead.
Is this kind of what you were hoping to see? Do you think this will be helpful in making sure these meetings meet the needs of the board, and hopefully really center our students in the conversation?
Yeah, just a couple of things I wanted to kind of center the conversation on as well. I like the piece with regards to the preparation prior to the meeting. I think that one of the things that we haven't really done, and I think this prompts us to do a better job with that, is a little bit of kind of, I guess, development and conversation of our protocol before we go in. And I really like the third bullet point that Tim's recommending, which is with regards to how do you kind of balance adult and student voice, so that it's not as much us talking, but we're hearing from our students. And then just some of the pieces with regards to note taking, as opposed to being just a strict transcript, that it's really trying to hit the highlights and some of the themes. Those are some things that I think resonated in Tim's and my conversation with regards to it. And then, as you shared, also kind of how that will be conducted, and then how we kind of move forward from there. And then the form that we just handed out, the very simple sheet, was something that supplements this protocol as well. So with that. open it
Yeah,
up.
and I would add also, it's really not part of the pre-planning, but a theme that came up, and you've heard it, I think, before in other settings, is if we're returning to a group that we've had conversations with in prior years, and we know, and we're hoping this gives us better documentation to kind of build on a good cycle going forward, but if we know topics that have come up with that group before, if we could acknowledge those and maybe where those went as part of that. And also kind of introduce kind of what is the board's role in all of this? Obviously, you're our governance body. You don't always manage the day-to-day. So both an educational, but also so students can see where the topics they've brought up, where they've gone, to help them see that their voices, you're doing these meetings because their voices matter to you. But it's important that they see that their voices have an impact as well.
Well, I think I like the idea of some sort of a follow-up communication with the group. As to, to validate. We heard what you said and we shared it with the board as a whole. We shared it with the DEI committee. We shared it with the building principal, whatever. Some kind of concrete what happened with what we talked about. I mean, if there isn't, some things there isn't process, but it's just a matter of then just letting them know, some kind of a communication.
No, I think this is great. I love having a little bit of structure to it. I'm hoping we can, even though this is written for the audience of the board members as kind of a training, watch out, remember this. I would love to share it with the students, just to say like, this is what we're thinking about, and just, planning for a desired outcome. Our desired outcome is to hear your voice and educate a little bit about what the board's about. And this is what we're going through before coming to you. So like expectations, aligning expectations as to what that meeting is and what it's not. So, yeah.
The other piece I look at is on Monday's board meeting, we have board development. If we have time, we've put in there. The topic is these listening sessions with the students, at least to kind of put it back on our radar that's coming up in the next several weeks. After your feedback here tonight, I can include that in there so we can review that here in December. And then my thought is that January, we could do a little bit more of a deeper dive into that, kind of do some of the overview of what our expectations are, and then actually set those meetings.
Are we targeting February? Is that for
I
the?
think so, because I'm looking at when we come back out of the holiday break, we have a couple of weeks where you're running up into finals at the end of the semester. The board's at convention in the middle of January. So just by default, you're at the end of January. So my thought was kind of the beginning of February timeframe.
We're also looking at that time for staff listening.
Correct. We're trying to do both.
So we kind of want to.
So I think a key thing out of respect then is also to give advance invites to the different groups to see who would be interested in hosting a board rep to come in.
Right.
Yeah, because I would think that, if they're going to give us questions, I don't know how frequently they meet.
Right.
Some of them don't need them weekly, I don't think. So I think we should probably get them this information pretty soon.
Hey, that's a really good point, Joan, because I mean, embedded in here, we think kind of the stage should be set for the meeting within 2
Right.
weeks. So that means, know that the board is coming into the group. So if the group wants to talk in advance about, do they have any particular topics they want you to know are important to them before you come in? So it's not a cold topic.
Right.
And also if you have, if you have a theme this year, we want to ask all the student groups about this topic. Well, let's get that on their radar in advance of the meeting too. So we would want to kind of move the scheduling ahead of time.
And do we need to restrict it to, I would want to do it earlier than the beginning of February, but I don't know if we need to restrict it to just the beginning of February, because maybe it doesn't fit in their time frame. maybe would be more appropriate for their scope of information.
Well, that was
I
one of
would-
the things.
Yeah.
I thought we got back from feedback was that. You know, to try to fit us in. Didn't work the same with every group.
Yeah, yeah, so let's just maybe give them, you know, February, beginning of February as a start date, but I could say anytime.
Have them
during
pick
those-
the date
yeah.
that be best for them.
Yeah, anytime after that.
That's fair. My thought is then we'd have started in February, see where they're at, but try to make sure we're completed with any of them before spring break, which isn't much.
We
We
can
should-
aim for that,
That's kind of a 2 month time frame
Yeah.
to kind of see where they're at.
okay,
Does that seem fair to everybody?
yeah, and I
Well,
like the
correct.
format.
So we'll bring this protocol back to the board so we can talk about that. Certainly I'll try to get it into December and otherwise it will be in the January piece. And then we'll get those things
Mhm.
scheduled for February and work with the student groups to see when they can. Perfect.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Alright. The next two items, I think I'll turn over to Tiffany, because this is ones that she's working very diligently with, the DEI Advisory Committee, and then also the focus groups, so.
Well, I just wanted to maybe start by just, we had our first, I know Tim, I know you already have one, we had our first DEI steering committee meetings, and I had a few extra folders, so I thought I'd just give you the kind of the materials and just walk you through what we did for our first meeting. And then I also have some information from our parent focus groups that we just did a week or two ago. So at our first meeting, we just kind of, first of all, went through the overview that you have all seen, that PowerPoint overview of what our goals are for the year. So we started with that. And kind of did an overview of what's the purpose of the DEI steering committee for the year, went over those pieces. We spent a lot of time at this meeting doing, if you look on the agenda on the left side of that folder, it says alignment of equity frameworks. So that was our primary focus for the first meeting. And if you look at the right side of the folder, those are our frameworks. So it gives you some information about what we were trying to review. If you look at just the first one, I think I maybe have shared this before, but the Ready for Rigor framework, the optimal learning framework, and then our PERTS framework, elevate measures as well. So we, as small group table teams, kind of worked through like, what are the commonalities across these frameworks? What are the things that are similar? What are the things that are different? And how do we think we could apply this to what we're doing in the district? So it's just kind of an initial dig into all of the information that we were going to use as kind of our jumping off point to try and create our goal is to come up with some type of a walkthrough form that we can use in classrooms. When we go into teachers' classrooms, we can say, point at specific things that we know are important when it comes to culturally responsive practices in schools, so that teachers, so it's not a nebulous thing, so that we have real examples of what this might look like. Are you greeting students at the door when they come in? Are there's specific things that you can look for? Because again, a lot of our staff have there's a Retta Hammond book on culturally responsive teaching in the brain. So they have kind of that foundational knowledge, but we're trying to make that next step into how do we actually put this into practice in the classroom. So it just gives you kind of the basic information that we went over, but that was our primary focus for that first meeting. Then we also created 2 subcommittees. One subcommittee just to work on like special observances. So how are we observing different cultural days or holidays, or even just different a Black History Month and Women's History, all of those areas. How are we messaging the same for all of these different things? Are we messaging on social media the same way we're messaging to staff? Some of those alignment pieces. And have we forgotten anything? Is there something that we should be including in some of our cultural observances that we're not currently including? And how can we make sure that we're honoring and celebrating and recognizing all different cultural backgrounds and the specific observances that go with those too. So that's one subcommittee. Then the other subcommittee is kind of a smaller group to really dig into like creating a draft walkthrough form, because obviously that'd be hard to do with like 30 people in the room, right? So we have a small subcommittee that's gonna meet and kind of walk through those pieces and then bring a draft back to our larger group in January. So it's kind of our first step there. And then we did have, I'll just fix those. Our parent focus group on November 28th. And we had about 40 parents in attendance. So I have to say, I was surprised at the turnout, but we had a really good turnout and it was all different cultures and backgrounds. We initially said students of color, and then some of the, Asian American people explained to us, we don't always identify as people of color. So like, that's not a term we generally use. And so we learned so much, and I think there are some things that I could have done differently, or we could have done differently in terms of how I set up the meeting. I was trying to keep my part really short so that the most of the meeting was on discussion and focus group and getting information from parents. And I probably should have extended mine a little bit more to be more detailed, because there's a little bit of confusion about why I, as a special ed person, am associated with this effort. So I could have done a better job explaining that at the beginning. So, but then as we got into our small groups and we had Percy Brown facilitated, and then we had a staff person at each group that took notes. And then I just went through all the notes and pulled out all the commonalities. So we started with strengths. We did a SWOT analysis, it's called. So strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And so I just tried to take those common themes and add them in here across these different areas. A lot of good information. I felt like people were very open about things they were frustrated about, but they were very passionate and obviously they really care about their kids and we all want to do better. And that really came out too, I thought, and Tim could speak to this too in the groups, like, we're not here because we think the district's purposely trying to do something to harm our children. We just want more, like, we want to learn, we want staff to understand, we want you to hire, recruit people of color so our kids see themselves in our staff. And so they were very, very professional, but gave some great feedback in terms of what some of our weaknesses are and how we can work to improve those, but also had a lot of strengths. And we're really appreciative of having the group. And I think the most important message that I took away at the end was, this can't be a one-year thing. This can't be a checkbox that we checked. Okay, we had parent focus groups. How are you going to follow up with us? How are you going to tell us, now that I have my summary done, I'll send that out to that group as well. And then how are you going to involve us in the future? Like, can we be part of the DEI committee? Can we be part of some more like school-based decision-making other than just like the family teacher organization or volunteering in the classroom? Like, that feels kind of superficial. How can we be at the table when decisions are being made about other topics in the district? So, and that they're excited about partnering and sharing ideas and strategies, and just really want to be involved. I'm super passionate. So
I think what you have here, Tiffany, is kind of some of the raw data that came out of that.
yes,
And you're right now also conducting different sessions with some of our affinity groups and student groups.
right. Yeah.
And that'll all come together as you kind of start to put together more of the plans that kind of surround it, which comes back to our steering committee.
Absolutely. Yep. And so yesterday and today, Percy Brown was doing focus groups with, yesterday was Los Sonadores and today was BSU. So and then he's also going to come back and meet with our MSAN team, I believe, at some point too. And that was one thing parents suggested, is to do middle school focus groups too. So we're working on some dates for some middle school focus groups too, because they thought that was important, that, they shared a lot of insights about what their middle school children, how they perceive school and how they're treated and some of those things. And they thought that might be really valuable information too. So we're definitely going to schedule those to get more information for middle schoolers.
Is the next step to have actionable items as a result of the things that have been, did you say that already? And I missed it.
No,
I'm
yeah,
sorry.
that's
Okay.
absolutely, because that's what parents asked too, like, how are you gonna use this information? And that was our goal, to bring it back to our steering committee and really talk about, like, what are some action steps that we could take? And that, again, I think that a big question is, how can we involve some of the people that took time out of their night to come and share their ideas and really want to be involved, like how can we involve? And I can't have a group of 80 people in a meeting, but like, how can we, you know, so try and get, you know, a group be represented on some of those teams as well, especially like the special observances. There was a lot of discussion about, you know, celebrating different cultures and educating and learning about different cultures. And again, maybe there's some things that we're not thinking of or we haven't included and that some parents from that group could help us with that too, so.
Generally speaking, did you feel like there were any actionable steps that would need to come to this committee? Or possibly like the policy committee or the HR committee?
I definitely think, the HR piece because that did come up, I think almost in every group about recruiting staff members of color. And I feel like that is something that's been a focus in the HR realm. And I know was one of the recommendations that came out of this group already. So I don't know that there's anything actionable other than just exploring, you know, other recruiting. And again, I'm not the HR person, but you know, exploring other ways to recruit staff or maybe different communities or avenues or, you know, something above and beyond what we're currently doing. But I know we're not just doing like I know we reach out to a lot of different universities and, you know, for a lot of different areas also because we have a shortage of staff, you know, shortage of teachers, especially, and trying to just always constantly recruit. But that definitely is something actionable, but I feel like it's something that HR has been working on and continues to work on.
Yeah, I think some of these, as we look through it, some of these things are predictable. Some of them are new as we brought. There's some things we learned. Some of them are already embedded into some of the disproportionality plans that you have going. I also believe we're probably going to come back with this data along with the student data to see how it triangulates here together. And then that will kind of look at, well, where we already have work going or where do we have gaps?
Right.
And what are some things that maybe were brought forward that are immediacy pieces, be it policy, procedure, those type of things. Thinking back to several years ago when we had some of our students in and we learned things just about our operations that we could change immediately. So I think seeing kind of where those pieces fall and then being able to assess it with that lens. I think that's the next step.
Because I know the discussion that when we recently had, like with our communications department too, was like new families and what do we do for new families when they come in and how do they get to know the community and how do they connect with each other? And we've had a lot of conversations and that came out in this information too, was like, how can we be more connected when we first, you know, move into town? But I just thought there was a lot of interesting feedback. And I think that the one that, I'll just summarize it, but it was this idea that, you know, how we manage incidents when they come up, whether it's hate speech or whether it's, you know, something in the curriculum or a current event or something that doesn't get handled. I don't want to say not appropriately or maybe thoughtfully or whatever the comment is, but the comment from at least this was specific to the group that I was sitting with was, you know what, if those things aren't appropriately handled and done in a timely and sensitive way, you lose trust with kids. When you lose trust with kids, they don't want to work hard for you. They don't have a good relationship with you. Then they're disengaged from learning, and then you might see some behavior problems. So it was just kind of an interesting when you think about that cycle. It makes sense. And, you know, and does that tie into, you know, why we maybe see additional, you know, some of our behavior data is the way it is. I don't know, but they just had some really insightful comments. And that really one of the parents' comments was like, you know, loving learning and being passionate about learning is at stake for our children. Like we want our kids to love learning. We want them to love coming to school and learning from teachers, but also, you know, being able to interact with their peers successfully too. So that was what stood out to me.
Tiffany, how did you advertise or connect to these parents? Where did that?
Yeah, I'm using I sent them a hard copy letter in the mail because
Who did you send?
all parents of students that in our computer system are identified as students other than white.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay, so
So-
you went to okay.
Yep.
So they had to identify. that.
Well, it's however their child is identified, right? So we had, you know, many white parents that may have children that are biracial or children that are adopted, or so it was
Right.
any parent or caregiver of a child that in our computer system is identified as, other than white. Cause we had a nice, cross section of all different cultures and races.
And then you just sent them a letter and.
Yeah.
um,
I made the mistake of just using my own letterhead though, and they called me out on this, and I didn't even think about it when I sent it, because when I send a letter, I just pull up my letterhead and it says special education on the top of my letterhead, and it didn't even occur to me
Yeah.
that, and so I was like, oh, and I said that to the group, I
Yeah.
said, like, thanks for pointing that out, because I didn't even think about
Yeah.
it. They said, well, we were wondering why, why am I getting this? Is my child being considered for special education? I'm like, no, it didn't even
Right.
click that I should have used a curriculum, or at least gone and just deleted that part of my letterhead, so,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Interesting.
I
That was
just-
a good turnout. then.
Yeah, it was very good, and from my parenting experience, when I would always stay get the newsletter in paper from school, because it was sitting on my counter, I would read it. In email, sometimes you get behind, or you're like, okay, I'll put it in a folder, and I'll get to it later, and you don't get to it, but if you have the hard copy in front of you, sometimes you get a better response, so.
So. What is the next step with these parents?
Yeah, so I'm gonna follow up with them on kind of the themes that came out, and then.
Just send it to them, not meet with them.
Right, I'm creating an email to just send it to them, but I definitely want to, this is where I wanna talk with our committee too, I wanna find some spaces for them to be able to be involved in what we're doing.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to find the best fit, like the special observances thing, I think that would be a perfect fit.
Right.
The walkthrough form, it's more educational. I don't know that would be appropriate, just because it's gonna be a lot of teacher jargon and, talk about pedagogy and some of those things rather than a more broad topic, but.
I think one of the things, Joan, that you're seeing is some of the work that it's starting to have more of a purposeful home. And that's really where the packet of the steering committee, so these things coming back, having folks from around our district kind of having an eye on them, having a consistent process and consistent piece to be meeting around them,
Right.
to then kind of keep the kind of the urgency of those pieces moving forward. So I think the next steps, you're seeing kind of the process here, not necessarily a recommendation of any
No,
sort, but
right.
just an update that the committee is in place, starting its work. One of the next steps that we actually had as part of disproportionality plan were the focus groups. That's now taking place. You're now gonna see the review and analysis of that data, and then that can inform kind of the work moving forward.
Right, because I think the question we'll ask at that January meeting is exactly what you asked, Dawn, is
Right.
what are our actionable steps here? When we look at the parent data, when we look at the student data, like what are our actionable steps and how can we put that in practice?
So Tiffany, a lot of good stuff here. Thank you for all you're doing. I'm thrilled that we have the steering committee with this focus. One of the things that resonated with me as I'm looking through this and thinking about the focus group with Percy and our students. It seems to me a lot of the time we hear from this group, and I don't mean we as a board, we as a district. And then we do an in-service with our staff about this. And yet, something I'd like you to consider, your committee to consider, is there a way to bring the voices together? So that the students themselves have an opportunity perhaps to share their experience in a meaningful way with the staff. When I was at the is it MSAP, is that right?
MSAP.
In this spring, and I think it was the spring before COVID, that's something that some of the Middleton students have done. And it just provides more of a dialogue opportunity and resonates better, I think, because we're communicating with each other versus hearing this is the issue and then you know, but are we really talking about it?
Mhm.
And so just something to think about.
Yeah, I like that.
How big is your steering committee?
We have 2 people from each building, so that's 12, and then we also have all 4 of Ed Services. And I'm trying to think, and there were a couple of buildings where a second person wanted to, or a third person wanted to join, so I think I added an additional 2, so we're probably
18,
18, 19, somewhere in there.
Good. Love that.
So unless there's any other questions, I'm gonna move on to future meetings. Am I
Nope.
missing it? Okay.
I'm sad.
All right, so my hope would be in the next meeting that we can talk through what those actionable items might be. Especially if any of them are board actionable items or things that need to be considered for. Like the board priorities that we reestablish every year. If there's anything that needs to be built into our conversations with the students when we go and have our student listening sessions.
Yeah, those would
Um,
be good topics.
Okay.
Student listening session topics.
So I don't know if it's appropriate to meet in January if understanding that, you know, there's time missed out of December, it's not like a full month's worth of time, work time between now and mid-January. Do
Yeah,
you feel like you would arrive at that place to be able to provide us with that feedback by January?
yeah, I mean, why don't we do, if we did it after January, our next DEI larger group meeting is January 11th, so maybe if we did it after that, that would probably be appropriate.
Can we do something at the end of January after we get back from convention?
Yeah.
Does that make sense? That would be,
The 22nd or the 29th.
yeah.
Something else that would, I think, be worth getting some feedback on, and we were. In the past, excuse me. Told that we would be getting some sort of a quarterly report on, the reporting system and what, and.
Reporting tools.
The reporting tools,
For the quantitative.
and we haven't had one yet.
No, we haven't.
And so, would that be possible for our next meeting?
Absolutely. I'm giving an update to the purple stage tomorrow morning, so it'll be pretty easy to.
So you have some numbers.
I have numbers, yeah, so I think what we would probably do, we could give you the first half of the year.
Yeah.
We're looking at a
Mhm.
meeting in the time frame we've been discussing.
How about January 25th or February 1st? Just picking
I would
Thursdays.
prefer January 25th.
Right.
I've got a meeting I'm trying to schedule for the first.
I was just gonna say, there's Waunakee FFA judging event on the 24th, if anybody's interested or hadn't seen that email. But yeah, the 25th works, and
25th?
if 5:30 is still okay.
I'm looking at December 25th, it doesn't work.
Probably not that day.
Yes.
You got something going on that day?
Oh,
Yeah,
Perfect.
so what time?
January 25th.
5:30?
January 25th at 5:30.
Perfect. Really, really great stuff. Thank you.
Do the other board members want to set up just a regular reoccurrence similar to what curriculum had done? Or do we want to continue to play it by ear in case there's a month we want to skip, or we can always pencil them in with a regular reoccurrence and then say there's not content to review, or that I have a conflict at this time, or
It's okay with me to go
month by month?
month by month. but
Okay.
Your schedule is probably tighter than mine.
We can keep going month by month, and then at some point I might bring it up again.
Okay.
All right. So I'd be looking for a motion to adjourn unless there's anything else.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Right.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Tiffany. Thanks, Tony.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks, Kelsey. Rebecca's not here tonight, because her daughter was teacher of the year in June.
Oh.